Local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank is local historian, writer for the Observer-Dispatch, and you've been involved with history, Frank, for as long as
many years.
Yeah.
Really, all my life, I've always enjoyed history.
Yeah.
I had parents who enjoyed history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, as I told you many times, my mother kept scrapbooks of just a good example, like when they tore down City Hall on Genesee Street. Well, maybe every 3-4 days, there'd be a photo in the OD or the press, daily press, showing how, it was coming. And she would cut them out and date them.
Oh, nice.
And all the construction with the arterials, all that east-west arterial, all that work was going on.
Yeah.
When Hotel Hamilton came down and the Devereux building, and dated everything, which I use as a resource now. But I've always loved history.
Didn't she also keep your columns, Frank?
Yeah. And I kept most of them too. But she kept the columns. And but I think even as far back when I was in 5th and 6th grade, I went to Brandegee School. And we had a principal, Roy E. Nichols, who was an amateur historian.
Mm-hmm.
And he come out with a little booklet one time about really the history of Old Fort Schuyler and Utica. Maybe 20, 25 pages. And I remember I got somehow, I don't know how, either my mother we got a copy, and I still have it. Mm. And I remember how many times I would read that. It had different names, area people in the early 1800s who had served in the Revolutionary War, now living in Utica. Names like then later Horatio Seymour, Roscoe Conkling. So I grew up with those names, and I always found it fun. Yeah, just like the title of the book that we put out.
History just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I just always enjoyed it. Yeah.
Frank, you mentioned, I'm going to go in a different direction in a second, but I just want to get back to two of those buildings that you mentioned, the really famous buildings, the Hotel Hamilton, which was where... where the old Boston Store garage. Yeah. Almost across from the OD building, a little closer to Genesee Street. Yeah. Yeah. Named after Hamilton College, by the way. Someone who bought it in, I don't know, 1930s or 40s. That was a great hotel. I remember being in that hotel. I liked that hotel.
It had more rooms than Hotel Utica. Mm-hmm. It was more of a blue-collar hotel than Hotel Utica, not as elegant as the Utica. But it had a big banquet hall. I remember when I went to Utica College, we had all our dances at the Hotel Hamilton. Mm-hmm. Many political parties. The Hotel Utica, I don't know about now, but never had a real big banquet hall. They had a lot of small ones. So the Hotel Hamilton had a big banquet hall, a lot of weddings there through the years. And a lot of political parties would draw a lot of people. And they would go to the Hamilton instead of the Utica because of that, although some were held at the Utica. Hamilton was a very popular place. Yeah.
And I recall, Frank, and I don't even know if this exists anymore, I don't believe it does, but our area had a press club for journalists, and that's where the meetings would be.
Yeah. Well, a lot of organizations had meetings there. And on the, it had two entrances, one on Bleecker Street and another on Oriskany Street. And the one on Oriskany Street, before you went into the lobby, there was a big hallway. And I remember there were a lot of offices there. AAA had their offices there, a couple of insurance companies. So if you went in on the Oriskany Street side and you walked through this lobby, there were a lot of retail stores and businesses. And then, the Hamilton had wonderful restaurants. A lot of people would have breakfast there, and but as I say, it was more blue collarish. Many weddings were held there. I had many relatives that had their weddings there.
You also mentioned the Devereux building, another building that we don't have anymore, but that one came down because of a fire, did it?
It had a fire, and then I guess it'd be too expensive to repair.
Yeah.
On bordered by Genesee and Franklin.
It was a
Franklin
triangular
Square,
building.
the triangle. Very historic building. I think we've talked about it before. At one time, New York State's 2 U.S. senators were from Utica. One a Republican, Roscoe Conkling, and one a Democrat, Francis Kernan. And they both had their offices for a while in the Devereux building.
How far up in the Devereux building? Do you know, Frank?
The what?
How far up?
Oh, I really don't. I really don't know. But of course, I remember the White Tower restaurant that was on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Hamburgers, 5 cents.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about and I don't remember the senators being there, but I do remember the White Tower.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about the White Tower was you could go in there and get a hamburger and a cup of coffee anytime.
Anytime. I remember when I was a police reporter, when I first started with the OD.
That would have been
Well, I started as a stringer in 1958, but full-time 1962.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
And I was police reporter, and I was always, just like when you were a reporter, always looking for that different story. And at that time, the policemen used to walk their beats. I don't know if they do anymore, but there was always a policeman at midnight would walk the beat just downtown, checking doors, so on and so forth. So I thought as a reporter, gee, I'd like to go around with him on his rounds.
Good idea.
So I did, and I met him at the station, and we walked downtown. He was checking doors along the way. Then about 1 o'clock, he said, let's have a hamburger and a cup of coffee. And we ended up at the White Tower.
Yeah.
And
the officer that you followed around that night, do you remember his name?
I don't. I'm embarrassed to say I don't. I'm trying to.
Well, I wouldn't be too embarrassed.
Yeah.
Another nice thing about the Devereux building, Frank, was that the backside, and I skipped school a lot, so I forget all those mathematical terms, but so it would be the flat side of the triangle.
On
So that was that side.
facing Genesee?
No, toward
Franklin Square?
towards the.
The Risky Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I remember, originally when the building was built, the reason the loading docks were on the backs of all those buildings because the Erie Canal was a Risky Street. Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you something about that Erie Canal and how it was on the back side. Frank Tomaino is our guest. We're talking local history. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank's our go-to guy when it comes to local history and trivia and memorabilia. And we were just talking about the Devereux building, Frank. And the thing that I remember about the Devereux building, secondarily to the White Tower, is on the back side of the building, the part of the building that was facing Oriskany Boulevard, which, of course, at one time was the Erie Canal.
Yep.
They had at least 2, maybe 3, big black rings. and they used those rings to tie up boats on the canal.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking of stores.
Yeah.
I don't remember those, but
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me because all those buildings along Oriskany Street, including the OD building.
Yeah. But the OD building was turned around, right?
Exact. The front entrance was on Catherine Street, and the loading dock was now the front entrance to the building facing Oriskany, which was the Erie Canal. So all those buildings, in fact, many of them were built because of the Erie Canal, and their loading docks faced the canal or Oriskany Street. The buildings along Bleecker Street and along Oriskany Street. Yep.
Wasn't there a seed company right in there somewhere? They used the loading docks.
A what?
A seed company, Bachelor Seed.
yeah,
Wasn't that in there somewhere?
Yeah, it's in fact, across from the back of the Devereux building. I'm forgetting the name, but even today, if you're driving south on Genesee as you approach Oriskany Street, I'm trying to think of the restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it the way we forget names now? But
Gerber's.
Sure, right on that building, right above you see, it's faded, of course, the name of the seed company.
Yeah. I think it's Bachelor, but I'm not positive.
Bachelor, that's it, Bachelor Seed Company,
Yeah,
you're right, yep.
The number of buildings that have come down in Utica over the years is kind of astounding, but we're not going to do a landmark story today. We're going to talk, well, before we get into that, I'm going to ask you about the telethon, which was just recently done right here on WUTR.
Yep.
And the site of it was 1608 Genesee Street, the site of the United County History Center, and big success, Frank.
Oh, big success, $37,000. You and I remember the days when it first started, when we would get 18,000, 17, I think the first one was 17,000. Then we got, 20, 21, but last year 37,000, and this year 37,000. Got to thank all the people. There's still people out there who love history.
Yeah, and thank you. You spent a lot of you spent your entire evening up there, and as did a lot of people. Yeah. An event that happened that night, Frank, I wish I'd have gotten into it a little bit more than I did, but when you and I were talking on air during the telethon, there were some artifacts that we had behind us, and one of them was the sword of General Daniel Butterfield.
Yeah.
And as I was holding it in my hand, Frank, first time I've ever held that sword in his Medal of Honor in my hand, I looked, and on the sword blade, kind of faded, well, of course, that sword dates back to 1860-something, was two words, Gaines Mills.
Gaines Mills,
yeah.
I never realized that until you told me. But General Daniel Butterfield, who was born and bred in Utica, New York, earned his Medal of Honor at the Battle of Gaines Mills in Virginia in 1862. It was a battle where, and the reason he won the battle, he was a brigadier general, and his brigade had, one of his regiments was from Pennsylvania, and as they were charging the Confederates, the Pennsylvania regiment, they were just getting slaughtered, and the Pennsylvania trooper who was holding the Pennsylvania regiment flag was shot. The flag fell to the ground. Butterfield, the commander, and he was always in the front. He was a fighting general, as you know. He just got on his horse and he rode. He scooped up the flag, and he turned to the men. All their officers had been killed, and he just encouraged them, "Let's go, charge." And
I think the words that he used was, and I just wrote a column about this actually from Memorial Day.
Oh,
it was, and I left the part out about the flag, and I'll tell you why. I couldn't remember if the flag he picked up was the American flag or another flag. So I'm glad I left it out now, because I thought it was the American flag. But anyway, he scooped up, how heroic. He scooped up the flag as his troops were just about ready to turn around and go the other way. and said, "Rally round me, boys, rally
That's
round
it,
me."
Rally round me,
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the thing that he's most famous for is not that, but
Well, co-composing taps. In fact, right after the Battle of Gaines Mills, the Union Army, General McClellan, who loved to retreat, he retreated to the Berkeley plantation in Virginia, and Butterfield was in a bad mood. He never liked to retreat, but anyway, each brigade had its own bugle call for lights out. It was most of them were like lively tunes. Well, Butterfield was in a bad mood. He had, he was forced to retreat, and he called his bugler, Oliver Norton, and a private.
Rochester, I think, wasn't he?
Right. Oliver Norton, yeah. And they co-composed because Butterfield couldn't write music, so he hummed and whistled, and they wrote what today we know it as the bugle call taps, which was a slower, more mournful, for lights out. And that night, at the Berkeley plantation, the bugler Norton played what is now taps. Other buglers heard it, and they claim even buglers on the Confederate side, not too far away, heard it, liked it, and it began to spread. And today, of course, it's famous. Yeah.
30 seconds before we go to a break, 20 seconds, and you went down there once, didn't you? And there's a monument. It's kind of a unique monument.
Pictures, yeah, at the Berkeley plantation.
And doesn't it play taps?
Plays taps, and well, maybe after the break I'll explain what it's all about.
All right. Frank Tomaino's our guest. We're talking local history. Short break, right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino's our guest. We're talking local history. I cut you off, Frank. You were about to say something about the monument to Butterfield.
Yeah, I was visiting historic sites in Virginia, and I was on my way to Monticello, Jefferson's, and it was I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday morning, beautiful morning, and it was about 9 in the morning, and I had some time, and I saw a sign that said Berkeley Plantation, visitors welcome. So I pulled in. There were a few out-of-town cars. I walked into there was a gift shop, and there was a woman, and I said, why am I here? What's so historic about this place? And she said, this is where taps. I said, what? And I looked, and they had a huge painting on the wall of Butterfield at his tent, with Norton and the composing taps. And she said, if you go out, it's a working plantation, but if you go out and turn left, we got a monument. So I went out, turned left about, I don't know, maybe 50 yards. It was on a hill, a big monument. I walked up there, and it said, there was a button, you push it, you heard taps. The bugle, here was that beautiful morning. And then I read the inscription. There were benches and everything. It was a little mini park. And it said, on this site in July, 1862, Brigadier General Daniel Butterfield, Utica, New York, composed the bugle call taps. And then I said, wow, here, Virginia, a Confederate state, here they got this monument honoring a Union Army general from Utica,
Right.
And really in Utica we don't have much There's no statue of him, although there is one in New York City. So then I went back to the gift shop. I stayed there for a while. I went back to the gift shop, and they had little postcards of the painting on the wall. And I bought a dozen, and I've used it in my column a couple of times.
Yeah.
That's, I would imagine taps is played every day throughout the world, hundreds of times.
Yeah, I hope so, because I just wrote a column saying that.
Oh,
so,
good.
good. And his whole family, I mean, the Butterfield family, his father
John Butterfield.
Butterfield.
The country's Mr. Transportation in the 1850s and 60s. Just about everybody in the country would know the name John Butterfield because it was his stagecoaches that first went from Mississippi to the West Coast, California.
A lot of people, let me interrupt you there,
Yeah.
Frank. A lot of people, hang on to your thought. A lot of people confuse what Butterfield did with the Pony Express.
Now, he really, I've read some books where he had nothing to do with the Pony Express, which only lasted a few months.
Yeah.
The big thing, they were finding ways, people in California were complaining that it took months to get mail. They were separated from the East Coast. The only way you could do is go by clipper ships, down the Atlantic, around the coast, up the Pacific Ocean. So the post office offered a contract, $800,000 for anyone who could run stagecoaches from the Mississippi to California. Now you're talking, a couple thousand miles, deserts. There were hostile Indians. You would need dozens and dozens of stations every so many miles. Butterfield took up the challenge, and he did it. The overland stage. Many old Western movies with John Wayne.
Yeah.
If you look at the stagecoach, it'll say overland stage. That's John Butterfield. Some of them say Butterfield overland stage. Some of the movies, Wichita, I'm trying to, a couple of others, where, in fact, one, Butterfield is a character in the movie. So John Butterfield was well known throughout the country, and that's General Butterfield's father.
He had to get that. I'm trying to think of the requirements of that contract, but he had to get mail and passengers from Tipton, Missouri to
San Francisco in fewer than 25 days.
25, and he just made it,
right? He did it in 24 days. One from Missouri to California, I think it was 24 days in a couple of hours, and back 23 days. And so he made it. Yep.
Speaking of movies, I've always been surprised that there was never a movie made of that, because you could get a lot of drama out of that, beating the clock and what happened along the way.
Yeah, and in fact, as you probably know, in Southwest United States, in Texas, Arizona, there are many communities that along that Butterfield Trail that he used, where they have annual events celebrating it, because it really opened up the West.
Mm-hmm.
The overland stage, because all of a sudden, not only mail, but people could go, from the east to the west by stage. They never could do that before.
And that gave rise, the Butterfield's company gave rise to another big company, of which he was the president, first
American
president.
Express.
Yeah.
He was one of the founders of American Express, and in fact, the first headquarters was almost right near Baggs Hotel. I'm in Baggs Square.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, American Express, the company, was writing some sort of a history of the company. And they contacted, at that time, the Oneida County Historical Society, now the History Center. And I remember Carl Saporito got some photos of the original American Express headquarters and some other information, and emailed it to him. So
yeah, it's something, it's always amazed me that, of course, it's easy for me to tell somebody else how to do business and spend their money, but you would think that American Express would want some kind of a presence in Utica that this is where it all
Yeah, I
started.
would say so, yeah.
Yeah, multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for coming in. It's always good to see you.
Yep, great to be here.
That's going to do it for us this week, but we'll be back next week. Don't forget cnyhomepage.com. There's lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.